So this was actually supposed to be taught last week, and then I found out Saturday our flight was canceled totally from Harrisburg. So then I was in this like freak out mode of trying to figure out how I'm getting to South Carolina. And our flights got moved to Allentown, so they were like 4 hours earlier. So I basically had to leave here at 9 in the morning last Sunday. So that's why I was not here. And then coming home, we kept getting delayed, and I didn't get to bed till 4 o'clock in the morning on Friday because there was bad storms that came through. So our flight kept getting delayed. We didn't finally take off down there till 11:30. Landed in Allentown a little after 1, then 2-hour drive home. So that was a rough ride home, but I'm here. Praise God. So this, the series, and obviously because the summer's been so crazy with this Navigate series, the beauty of it is each lesson is kind of its own thing. It all kind of goes together. So the whole purpose of it all is talking about your life having fulfillment with peace and purpose, and just living a life that God wants you to live, right? So all these lessons kind of go together for that purpose. So this lesson 6, I made a little slide if Jen wants to put it up, is on navigating the what ifs of life. What ifs. So the term what if is a hypothetical question that someone asks to explore a potential future event, especially an undesirable one. Many of us walk through life less connected to our present time because we are subconsciously attempting to prepare ourselves for the possibilities of the future. These what-if moments are mental preparations being made in response to fear of future situations that haven't even happened yet, and in most cases never will. Generally, the roots of these imaginative narratives can be found in the hurts of our past. The mental state created by living in the what-ifs is one of stress, anxiety, and fear. This hypervigilant thinking is exhausting, and it can precipitate feelings of chronic stress and hopelessness. The purpose of this lesson on what ifs is to reroute past the roots of these narratives on a journey towards peace and fulfillment. So as I stated earlier, living in the what if can make it difficult for us to function in our present. We tend to emotionally disconnect from our present as we subconsciously try to predict and prepare for the unlikely worst-case scenario that are perceived to be looming in our future. The key to reconnecting to our present is to disconnect from those what-ifs. The present is the situation that we're currently living in, right? So why do we constantly try to reconnect to like everything that happened in the past or everything that could be in the future? Why can't we ever seem to enjoy the moment that we're in right now? It's always like, oh, this happened in the past, and this is looming over me, or oh no, this might happen. So we can't go back and we can't relive the past. We can't predict what's going to happen in our future. Our true peace should come simply from living in the present. How many of you lay awake at night preparing for a scenario that would bring you a ridiculous amount of financial wealth? Do you ever do that? Like, you're not sleeping, you're so tired, you're not sleeping, you're like, yeah, this is going to happen, I'm going to come into all this money and like all these like grandiose things. No, more often than not, when we're laying awake at night, we're exhausted, we're vigilant about preparing for something that's hurtful or something that could possibly happen in the future that's going to cause a demise, right? That's generally what happens when we're awake. So I was thinking about this, and it's crazy that this lesson got put to this week because I literally lived through with Brooklyn. And please, she's downstairs, don't go up to her and be like, I hear you don't like riding in a plane, because it's going to freak her out. And she's going to be like, why did you tell everybody? Okay? She doesn't like riding in planes, okay? She did it because I made her. But here's the scenario. So Brooklyn rode in planes many times when she was younger. She had no clue. Like, when you're young, when you're 4 years old, you're not thinking about a plane crashing. Your brain just doesn't think like that because you don't know, you haven't seen like real life scenarios. When you start to get older, you know, she's of teenage now, she's a teenager. So they hear things. She's been hearing about all these plane crashes and doors flying off and all these things. So then she's like, you know, in that moment. When you're 4 years old, you don't think about that stuff. So she flew quite a few times when she was younger. When Pastor was evangelizing and he started flying out more, we would fly sometimes and meet him places and so on and so forth. She never really got scared flying. Never really seemed to bother her. It's just within the last year or two that we went to Missouri when she was the real McCoy. She literally was in like full anxiety mode. And then flying down, literally taking off, she hates it. She literally has to hold my hand the whole time. She was like literally physically like almost shaking. She hates it. And once we got up in the air and everything was good, and then what was terrible about it was they kept coming over the loudspeaker and saying, there was a bad storm that was going through last Sunday right through Myrtle Beach. And they said the first 20 minutes should be okay, but then we're going to hit some major turbulence. And she's flipping out. Like, she's like, oh, my God. And so they obviously, they planned for the worst case scenario. They even had our flight attendants sit down and buckle up. They would not let them up. They couldn't come back through and get trash or anything. So the last 40 minutes of the flight attendants were seated. And so I'm like in panic mode because I'm like, she's really going to flip out if we really start hitting turbulence. I was just praying. And thank God we really didn't hit. He went out and around, and I don't know if he was like a former Air Force pilot or what, but he was coming in hot, and he went like right through that. We're like, landing was like, I've never had a landing like that in my life. Normally they come in slow and steady. No, he was. And then she was okay. We were on the ground. So then coming home, I'm thinking, okay, she's going to be better, right? Well, then we get to the airport, and a major storm came through. A bolt of lightning hits right out on the runway. You could see it, and you could feel the ground shake. And she was like, we can't fly in this. So she was freaking out. But everything, so I said all that to say this. The whole time she's like, but Mom, what if lightning strikes the plane? What if, this happens? And what if that happens? What if we crash? We're going to be up in the air and this, that, and the other thing. And it's all these what ifs. What if, what if, what if, what if? I finally looked at her and I said, Brooklyn, you're planning for something that is like, you have no clue. These are all what-if scenarios. You're letting your mind play out all these what-if scenarios, and you're getting yourself all worked up. What if we land safe? Just why are you automatically going to the negative? So our imaginations can go crazy with scenarios like this. But what about past experiences that are connected to pain, shame, regret, all those things that trigger avoidance response that drive us to live in a world of what-ifs? So we're not even talking about, so with Brooklyn, the scenario is she hears about things, right? She hears about planes crashing. She's all upset. She's worried that's what's going to happen to her. But what about when we physically have gone through something? And so our past experiences are connected to all those, the pain, the shame, all these things. And then our mind starts playing what-if scenarios because of all those past experiences. So those narratives are written by a playwright that is familiar with our past story, and that writer is our imagination. It's our imagination. So as humans, we've been gifted with the mental capacity that, to my knowledge, has not been proven to present in any other form of life. Okay, we're the only life form on the planet that has an imagination, so to speak. Okay, it's not like problem solving. There's animals that have been proven to have problem solving. But to actually imagine something is to form a mental image that isn't true or real in the present, but is presented so realistically that our minds and our bodies respond to it as though it's a reality. No other animals go through that. No other species goes through that. Remote possibilities in the future are experienced almost as strongly as if they are happening right now. Matthew chapter 6:26 says, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them." Right? Birds, they don't go through situations of not being able to find food. And then they're holding on to that and they're imagining, oh my gosh, next week I'm not going to have any food. Birds don't do that. We do that as humans, right? We're the only ones that can come up with these imaginative scenarios. I had to laugh because there's a crow that hangs out here. And I don't know if you guys know, but crows have been proven to be really smart. So he got mad at me because I'm telling you, this bird, right? The dumpster out here, somebody kept leaving the lid open. And he was having a heyday. He was going in there, yanking stuff out. He had trash strewn all over. So the one day I came to drop off trash, and I heard him squawking because they have a loud, very, noticeable squawk. And he's sitting there watching me at the dumpster because he had flown away when I pulled up. And so then I'm looking at him, and I went, and I shut the lid, and I looked at him, and he's like, ah! And he was mad because the lid was shut, right? So then he flies away. I came back a few minutes later, and I pulled up to the door because I had to come into the church. He literally flew. I could hear him as soon as I got in my car. He starts squawking. He was over on the light pole. And he's squawking and he's flying and he's sitting up here on top of the roof of the church. And the whole time I was getting out of my car, he's up there squawking at me. He knew. He was mad. He was like mad that I shut off his food source. And then Richard texts me yesterday, and I told Richard about it because I said, hey, bud, when you take the trash down, make sure you flip the lid because that crow is getting into everything. He texted me a picture of him yesterday. He was sitting out on that pole out there, and he must have been squawking at Richard. Because Richard texted me a picture and said, he's not happy. And I was like, clearly he knows we have shut off his food supply. He's mad. So when we imagine narratives, we have emotional and sometimes physical responses as though we're living it out in the present as a reality. Past drama and negative life events serve as a backdrop to set the stage in our minds for the false reality of these what-if scenarios. The more engaged the imagination, the more the scenarios present as a reality rather than an unlikely possibility. And I can say that because as Brooklyn was sitting there letting that play through her mind, like, oh my gosh, we're going to crash, and she has these feelings, you could physically see it come over her. Like, it was physically affecting her body. And that's where anxiety comes from. So anxiety is actually the physical manifestation of things going on in the inside in our hearts, in our imagination, our mind, and our heart. So imaginations are the illusionists of our minds. It's the smoke and mirrors, so to speak. Our imaginations arrange evidence and sell it to us as real or likely narrative. We imagine a possibility for a future as a reality that we are experiencing or we will soon experience. We dream of ways that we could be hurt or experience loss, and then we cope by vigilantly making plans to protect ourselves from that pain or loss. Our imaginations can take us on all kinds of crazy places. So I grew up in the 80s, and we did a lot of imaginative play. We didn't have all these video games, tablets, cell phones. We didn't have any of that. We did a lot of imaginative play. My cousin and I, Nicole, she was, we were very close in age, so we would play house a lot with our baby dolls, and we'd pretend we were married and do all these things. At one point, my brothers and I, we actually made a whole entire grocery store in my grandmother's basement. We would take, every time like they would have just say like a Ritz container, like the Ritz cracker box and stuff like that, we'd say, don't throw it away, don't smash it up. And we'd make it look like it was still, And we had all this stuff set up. We had a whole grocery store. One time we made a whole town we took like Kleenex boxes and stuff, and we would wrap paper around them, and we would draw like little windows and doors and stuff and make them look like houses and post office and all these things. And we had a whole town. She had like this back patio. We had a whole town on top of this huge table, and we would drive our Matchbox cars. So we were very imaginative. Well, where does that come from? Like, where does those scenarios and those backdrops come when you're a child and you're playing imaginative? Well, it comes from living and seeing things. You read books. You might see movies. You're going about the town, drive around with your parents. You have all these things in your mind, and then you're playing it out. That comes from an imagination, and that's good for kids. It helps. It's proven to help kids. To have an imagination. It's proven to help them. It develops a child's cognitive, social, emotional. Their physical skills. All those things. So imaginations are not all that bad. But the negative flip side of that human imagination is that as adults, it becomes unhealthy sometimes, right? I was reading in this lesson, he has a story, and then I was like thinking, because I know you guys have heard in the course of 5 years of us being here multiple times about the loss of our baby, and that literally just was the anniversary, the 11-year anniversary of that, July 2nd. And so for me, like, I'll read his story here in a second. But for me, how this hit home was when we lost baby number 3. And it's something that this literally, the whole what ifs, it played out for me because of this. So I had Madison, I had Brooklyn. No problems with pregnancy at all. No issues whatsoever. So, I get pregnant. I go to my first appointment, which I think I was like 8 or 9 weeks at that point. They kind of put you off now till you're like 8, 9 weeks. They do an ultrasound. They give me a projected due date. I said, well, that doesn't really seem right. And you could see the baby's heart beating. You could see the baby. You could see it. totally formed. Like it looks like a bean still at that point because it's so small. But I kind of questioned the due date, and the ultrasound tech had me go in and meet with the doctor, and Pastor was there for that. I think he was there for that appointment. And as soon as I walked in, I had never seen this doc before, and he's like, "Is this your first baby?" And I said, "No, it's number 3." And I said, "I know when I got pregnant. I know the date. Like, I know the time. This due date's not right." And he's like, "Well, the heartbeat's a little low, but everything seems to be okay. It's just the measurement's a little off. So we'll bring you back in like 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll just check the measurement again. Sometimes it's just the position of the baby. The measurement's not that great and stuff." So for 3 or 4 weeks, I was walking on complete pins and needles. Like, I had no idea what to expect. You know, when you have Google, so you're Googling things. And mind you, I had no symptoms of a miscarriage at all. Nothing. I still felt totally pregnant. Nothing. And so basically they say 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, but the difference is that most of the time that miscarriage happens so early on, you don't even know. Like, you haven't even taken a pregnancy test. So most women don't even know that they have miscarried a baby at some point. The difference was that what this is, I made it all the way to the end of my first trimester. And that is a 1 to 5% chance of losing a baby during that 12 to 19 week period. So it made it so much more harder. And then, so anyway, fast forward, so I go back and for the ultrasound because they wanted to double check the measurements. And then that's when they said that the baby had grown a little bit more. I had made just like 13 weeks, I think it was. And they said the baby, it looked like it had just passed within the last week of that time frame. And because I had no symptoms of a miscarriage at all, my body had no clue. Because this was not like a hormonal thing. It wasn't anything wrong with me. What they said was the baby's heart was not forming right, and so it passed away. So at that point, I didn't even have to, like, they usually have a DNC, what they call a DNC. I had to have a full D&E, which is like even worse because you're further along. So I just remember waking up from that surgery, and they had to do it. They wanted to do it immediately because the doctor, the surgeon, was going on vacation, and they didn't want me hemorrhaging at home. They said it could be really bad. So they do this emergency surgery, and I remember just waking up from that surgery and like looking at those ceiling tiles that have like all the little dots and just like feeling so surreal, like life was just not even real, you know? And so people lose babies all the time, and I get that. It's, you know, but when you see your child on an ultrasound, you see that baby, and it's growing, and you feel it. You feel pregnant. You feel everything. You see the heart beating. You've never had issues before. It's a huge shock. It's huge. And I actually said to the doctor, I was like so distraught. It was a very rough time for me. And I told the doctor, like, just tie my tubes because I could never go through this again, ever. And so I guess I anticipated all the what ifs of like, if I want to try to have another child, am I going to go through this again? You just start running all these scenarios, right? And I begged him. I was like, just tie my tubes while you're in there. And he's like, I won't do that because you might change your mind. I was like, okay, I'll come back in a couple months and I'll have you do it then, right? And I was so set. I'm like, I don't want to try again. I don't want to have another baby. We're done. And I had 3 different people come up to me and talk to me that had no idea. 2 of them didn't even really know the full situation. And they all said the same thing to me. And it was at that same time, within like a week or 2 of us losing the baby, that we had gone to Connecticut to minister. And we prayed for a couple that had been trying for years to have a child. And we prayed for them, and they ended up getting pregnant. And their baby was born, I think, a month or 2 before Asher. So I said all to say that we ended up conceiving Asher. It was a miracle. But even when I conceived him, I was walking on pins and needles the whole time, the whole pregnancy. I actually bought one of those like Doppler heartbeat things. I was constantly checking for the heartbeat. I was a stressed mess. Like the whole probably first 2 trimesters, it was a hot mess. So I understand like everything he was saying in this, all the what if scenarios, everything played through my mind. What if this? What if that? I every symptom I had, if one little symptom started to kind of go away, from being pregnant, because I would have all these weird different symptoms. If one symptom started going away, I'm like, oh my God, am I miscarrying? Am I miscarrying? You know, you're on edge the whole time. Well, he talks about this Randy Brown. He talks about his wife, Lisa, his first wife, went to a follow-up appointment after having her gallbladder taken out. And it was just supposed to be a routine appointment. And their older daughter, Jenna, was in town, and she said she'd go with her. So he was at work, and he received a text from his daughter, Jenna, saying, everything's okay, but meet us at home. So he felt like something must be wrong. So he texted her back and said, I'm just going to call you right now. Put me on speakerphone so I can hear what the doctor's saying. He was driving down the road, and the first words that he remembers hearing were fatal and terminal. And they were words that he never expected to hear. He was expecting to possibly hear maybe there were some complications or concerns that they wanted to follow up. But he said, those words changed my entire family's life forever. We were never the same after that. A few months of treatment transitioned into hospice care, and a few weeks later, Lisa passed. It happened so fast. It was like it came out of nowhere, and we were all in shock. And then he goes on to say, a few years later, I met my wife, Suzanne. I had retired from my secular job. We were married, and we settled into our new life. About a year after we were married, Susie went to the doctor for a checkup, and the checkup produced evidence that Susie was going to need a biopsy. The biopsy results necessitated surgery to remove a mass, and my emotional response to this news about my wife were off the charts. I was anxious, irritable, and my blood pressure went through the roof. I was incredibly disconnected from the present, as I seemed to be bracing for what would happen next. He said, I can remember waking up in the middle of the night and looking at Susie in the dim light. To me, her face appeared thinner, and as I stared at her, my mind started drifting. I remembered her mentioning that she was tired all the time, and that was all it took to send me spiraling. The false evidence that I was going to lose Suzanne the same way I lost Lisa picked up mass and velocity like a snowball rolling down a mountain. Isolated in my own thoughts, I was allowing my imagination to write my story. The past hurtful story provided the context and set the stage. I had picked up the props, and my imagination arranged them all into a well-thought-out story of a repeated tragedy. My past had become my present and was predicting my future. I was in an emotional tailspin, gripped by fear and despair. I braced myself for the bad news I would hear at the next doctor visit. Vigilance was my coping behavior as I prepared for the crash landing. I was emotionally exhausted. My present time was replaced by my past painful narrative of a great personal loss. I was experiencing it emotionally and physically. Inescapable anxiety and stress were my dominant emotions. So it's scenarios like these that can cause us to become subconsciously stuck in our past and disconnected from our present. These difficult times can lead us to engage in an unproductive, negative thinking and destructive coping behaviors in an effort to avoid that pain and stress. Unhealthy connection of linking our past, present, and future is the juncture that God belongs to you. He wants us to break a strong separation from our past. We often see God as powerful in creating our new beginnings. But in this case, we need to trust in God in helping us to create an ending to the what was. So let's look real quick at the story of Noah in the Bible. So in Genesis chapter 6, verses 11 through 14, we see that God saw that the earth was corrupt and it was filled with violence. And God decided to destroy the earth and all living creatures. And he instructed Noah to build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it inside and out with tar. And then skipping to Genesis chapter 9, 12 through 17, God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set a rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbows appear in the cloud, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures. So God then said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all of the life on earth. So even though God found it fit to destroy the earth with a flood because of all the corruption, God expressed grace to Noah in the form of a plan. So his plan was for Noah to go and build this ark and essentially save his family and all the animals. And when God shut that door and the flood began, it rained for 40 days, and that water level rose to over the highest mountaintops. Can you imagine realizing that all human life perished except for you and your family? They were on that boat for 1 year until they were able to step back out onto dry land. Can you imagine going into that boat and realizing that's it? Like, once that door was shut, all those people were perishing. Like, you're on that boat with your few family members that followed you and some animals, and realizing that it's real now. Like, the rain started to come down. Like, this is real, right? And then those people, once that door shut, we just saw Noah with I think it was Brother and Sister Soto when they were here. We went and saw Noah at Sight and Sound, and they always depict the Bible stories so well. But like, that door shut with like a loud slam, and then all those people are like screaming because it hit home. It was real at that point. They knew when those raindrops started falling, it was real. So on the other side of the coin, Noah's probably like, I mean, I can imagine him having survivor's remorse. You talk about people that go over into war. My grandfather went through that. His whole platoon, he had got sent home, and his whole platoon in the Vietnam War, the very next day was blown up and everybody died. He had survivor's remorse because he was like, God, why did you save me? And you blew up my whole platoon of people, So when their time in the boat was over, God made a covenant with Noah that would last for all generations. He vowed to never destroy the earth with flood again. And as a sign that God would keep his promise, he put that rainbow in the clouds. A sign that we still witness today when it rains and there's sunshine, right? We still see the rainbow. We've been seeing it a lot this summer because it does nothing but rain, seems like. So that rainbow was not just a one-time wonder. It was something that we continue to see that is that covenant that he's never going to do that again. But can you imagine with me for a minute? The Bible talks about how before the first flood came with Noah, they really didn't have rain. They had scientists have discovered, or they've looked into this, and they compare like what the Bible says, and they talk about how the water or the earth was like watered with like a dew, and then they had like water spouts and different things. They never had rain like we see it now, right? It was totally different. That's how the earth was watered. Well, it took Noah between 55 and 75 years to build that ark. And during that time, he had to endure unrelenting criticism from the people around him for what he believed. But then the rains came. And those people had never witnessed anything like that before. They had never seen a flood. And so he had to watch all those people perish. And he had to say goodbye to people that he had known. I mean, people lived a lot longer back then. So how many people did he know during his lifetime? He had to watch them just suffer in that flood, right? So this whole event had to have been very traumatic for them. They probably suffered that survivor's guilt. They saw the loss of lives and other tangible things that they were connected to, like their villages, their homes, and they would never see those again. We can only imagine the trauma of living through that storm. It rained for 40 days and seemed as though it would never stop. There was no sight of land, and I'm sure they wondered if the boat would hold together during this long endeavor. The chronic stress of being on a boat with the same people and all those animals for over a year must have been overwhelming. The schedule of caring for each and every animal must have been very hectic. Noah was responsible for all of this, and how was it all going to turn out? What was the earth going to look like after the flood? I'm sure they had to keep encouraging one another in hopes that it would eventually end. There was probably many days where they just wanted off of that boat. And reading this story, I'm thinking about like the victims of the Texas flood. They're still looking for people and bodies and stuff. And it's so sad, like how quick those waters rose. I mean, they said 26 feet in less than 2 hours. You can't prepare for something like that. There's no sandbagging it. There's no, I mean, the one trailer park that I saw the video of, because the in and out for the trailer park was across 2 small bridges that crossed that river. It was kind of like almost like a little island. They said it was very isolated. There was no in and out other than those 2 roads, and those people were trapped. Their whole trailers were swifted away. Like there was no getting out. The lady that ran the park, I don't know if you've seen any of the interviews with her, but she was saying that just 45 minutes prior, she had walked down and she saw that it rose up a little, but she said that was normal for that river when they would get rain, because that river normally is just it's more like what we would call a creek here in Pennsylvania. So they were used to it just rising a little bit with rain. She said in 45 minutes, it went from that to, 20 feet. There was no getting out, right? So I believe that one of the reasons why God gave Noah and his family the rainbow in the sky was because God knew that their journey on the ark wouldn't just end the moment that they stepped off that boat, right? That all that's not going to just end the moment that they just walk off the boat. God knew he was going to have to be the one to show Noah that the ark experience had ended, that point of his life had ended, and that was the covenant, was the rainbow, okay? God knew that Noah's new normal was going to involve rain and even some storms, and without God providing an end, Noah's family would experience a continuation of that trauma that had happened on the ark. Noah needed a sign that the flood chapter of his life had ended, and that no matter what life looked like in the future, no matter what evidence looked like, he was not going to be back in that traumatic flood. So can you imagine Noah's physical and emotional response the first time that he saw clouds gathering on the horizon? That probably brought some physical anxiety to him because he had gone through that, right? The first time that he heard a thunderbolt, thunder like lightning and then the thunder just crashing. I can't imagine the first time he heard all those, like his physical, emotional response to all that probably was kind of off the charts. His anxiety was probably really high at that point. God knew that there would be gentle rains, but also major storms in Noah's future. And we often connect God working in our lives to him giving us miraculous new beginnings. But God had planned for Noah's life after the flood. And God was going to use Noah and his family to multiply the earth. But before Noah could walk in his God purpose, Noah had to let God do some foundation work. He had to trust and embrace God's miraculous end to that flood experience so he could walk into and fully experience God's new beginnings. So how do we apply this to us? Well, this same thing is true in our lives. We have to trust that God's going to provide a miraculous end to our past events, right? The ones that are going to keep writing negative impacts if we allow them through our imagination and stuff like that. If we don't allow God to say, okay, that was the end to that part. That was the end to that story. You've got to stop allowing your mind to take off and, worry about everything, all the what ifs, what's coming down the pike, what's next. If we allow God to do that, to say, this is the end of that, we're moving on to something else, we can expect great things. So we go back to the whole rainbow in the sky. That was kind of like the covenant with them, and that was the proof from God to Noah. That was the end of that, right? Because he said he's never going to destroy the earth with flood again. He's probably going to destroy it some other way, and we're headed that direction pretty quickly, I feel like. But we know that it's never going to be through a flood, and so that was his covenant and his promise. So when we inject what-if questions into our life, we're constantly walking on this what I would call like fear eggshells, right? We're constantly walking on eggshells of fear. I think that in life we need to learn, and Frank and I have had this conversation. Me and Pastor have had conversations with Frank, because the first time he flew was like 2 years ago when you went to Atlanta with us, and he, very much like Brooklyn, was fearful because you hear all these negative things. I had to keep telling Brooklyn, hey, so when you fly, you hear about a plane crash, right? And it sounds so terrible because they make a big deal about it because, 100 people might die at once. But do you realize how many people die in car accidents every day and you have no problem walking out and getting in your car? It's actually safer to fly than it is. It doesn't seem that way because when you hear about a plane crash, it's so dramatic, right? Because they don't happen very often. She even was to the point, this was bad. So there was a board in the airport where it showed all the ingoing and outgoing flights, and it had like a map, and you could see the whole East Coast, and you could see Myrtle Beach Airport, and there's like all these planes in and out, and they're like, the ratio size, the plane looks huge on there because it's showing its thing, and she's like, Mom, those two planes are going to crash. What are they doing? Are they in the sky? Can they see each other up there? I'm like, there's a whole flight plan up there. Like the pilots have everything. They don't even fly close to each other. They're probably, half a mile away from each other, even in the sky. But to her, she's thinking it's like down here where, you're driving and you're almost running into people and you're so close. There's close calls all the time. So we just can't walk around with that fear all the time. Frank got over his fear. I think he still doesn't like the idea of flying, but he took that risk, right? You did it. We kind of made you. We got all the way to Baltimore Airport. He's like, he saw this plane taking off, and he's sitting in the back. He's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I said, what are you going to do? We're here. We're leaving. And he's like, just leave me here. I'll Uber food. And I'm like, we're not leaving you in the long-term parking for 4 days and you Ubering food. Like, that's just not going to work. You're getting on the plane. And then he was okay afterwards. So, I think that we have to learn how to take some risks in life. And just trust that God has our back. Yes, things have happened. Things have happened in the past, but we're not going to hang on to that. We're going to allow God to push us forward into his purpose for our life and allow him to just guide us as we trust him to step out, right? When we stepped out into evangelism, we had gone from, so I had Madison, I went from a very good paying job working in the dental office to stay home with her because till I paid for daycare and I paid my tithes and I paid for gas to get back and forth to work and all that, I was going to be making like $40 a month. And I'm like, this is not even worth it. And I was making good money back in 2008. And so I first left that. So then I'm stay-at-home mom, so we're living on one income. And he's being asked to preach out more and more and more and more to the point where we had no more vacation time. We were on the youth committee. We didn't have enough vacation time. And he finally came home one day and he was like, well, I think we just need to branch out into full time. And I'm looking at him like he's got 5 heads. And what are you talking about? Like, how are we going to, we have a family. Like, how are we going to sustain this? And I was pregnant with Asher. Well, before I got pregnant with Asher, we were already talking about it. It was in the works. And then I was pregnant with Asher. And then when we branched out, when we first left, Asher was only 3 months old. He was born in May. We left in August. So we had 3 kids on the road, pulling a fifth wheel trailer. We still had our house. And there was so many what if questions in my mind, but I just had to trust God. And then the crazy thing is once you see God constantly coming through time after time again, then it just continues to build that faith. But until you take that first step and branch out and don't allow your past and things that have happened in the past to hold you back, you can never get to that point. You can never continue to go into the future. God really took care of us in evangelism. And I've had to talk to people that have branched out that we've met over the years because it's the same what if questions. You just don't know. You just don't know what the future holds. And when I say take a risk, I'm not telling you to go skydiving with a carabiner from the Dollar Tree. Don't try that. You want to have equipment. You want to be prepared. But at the same time, you have to allow God to help you branch out and trust him, right? So in closing, imagine with me for 1 minute here, a drama set, even on this stage, built for a play, right? In this set, you see mountains. We may have mountains. Sister Savage is an amazing artist. She painted mountains on a board. There's mountains. There's horses. There's a prairie and a valley, and you might even see some cows. And one actor says to the other, we need to round them up. Well, when you hear that statement, you might expect to see some cowboys possibly rounding up some cows or, doing a cattle drive for branding, right? But what if we see the set in a different way? It's now being depicted as a schoolyard. You'll see a schoolhouse with playground equipment, maybe slides, some swings, stuff like that. And then you hear an actor say to the other one, let's round them up. Well, hearing that line in a different backdrop, you're going to draw a different narrative, right? So the first one, you're thinking, oh, this is a cowboy theme. It's a Western show of some sort. Well, the second one, you might be picturing a teacher blowing the whistle. Hey, let's round them up. The kids are going back inside from recess. Totally different scenarios because of the backdrop, right? Similar to this illustration, we don't have control of everything that life hands us, right? But with the help of God, we can change the set or the backdrop that it's played out on, right? So changing the set has a great impact on our perception of the present experience and a powerful influence on the anticipation of what is coming up in the next scene. We have to allow God to remind us that certain scenes in our lives have truly come to a close. And when the rain and the storms come up, we don't have to experience them as a continuation of that previous scene, right? We can move on to something else. And those rains and storms that show up in our lives, they don't have to be experienced as that continuation of a previous flood, because storms are going to happen. We're going to sometimes feel the emotional, physical responses that start to build with those. But we need to trust God rather than trusting our own vigilance and imagination of what's going to happen, okay? Our focus should be on a place of healing where we refuse to let our imagination write our story. We have to refuse to live in fear, which disconnects us from the present time that we're living in. And with the help of God, we are able to then drop the curtain on the what-if drama and live life on the stage that He has set for us. And that's a stage of peace and fulfillment. That's what He wants for our lives. He wants us to trust Him on the ending of what might have happened, new beginnings, not holding on to those things, walking in His peace and purpose, going forward, moving forward, and not dragging that stuff with us and all the what-ifs that come along with letting our minds wander. Okay? Let's try to apply this, live in our future, or live in our present, and not drag everything from the past into our future, right? I have found even just like, I don't know, just even the last year, just the constant, I don't think people realize sometimes, I mean, some of the people that help us with events and stuff, they understand. But all the things that go into running a church for like future events, like we do our calendar planning in October. And we plan out the next year. We have everything set. That's why we give you guys calendars. That's why we try to, because you can't just throw things together haphazardly last minute, right? The saying goes, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail, right? Because things don't happen. But I had found like in the last year that I was constantly like anticipating like the next thing, like what's going on next. And it was stressing me out big time. Like I was constantly living up here in this like level of stress. And I realized I'm not even enjoying my present. Not even enjoying like what's right now, like what's this week. I couldn't even enjoy it because I was so stressed out. And the same goes for, and I think that's why our society deals so much with like anxiety, and we're constantly living on this high anxiety thing, because we're constantly tagged into like the news and what's going on around the world, and it's just too much. We're constantly tagged into all the things that have happened in our past. We're dragging it in. We're dragging all the horrible things that we hear about and aren't going on in our world. I saw a thing the other day. This lady said, our minds, like, we are not meant to hear about every horrible thing that's going on in the world. We can't handle it. Like, honestly, our minds are not. And that's why us constantly being connected to Facebook all the time, constantly being connected to all these, and you're hearing about all this stuff that's going on everywhere. It drags you down. Because you're looking at the world like, it's terrible. Everything is terrible. Everything's horrible, and it starts to pull you down. But if you live in the present, stop being connected to the past failures and the past things, you live in the present, and you just get up and you thank God for the day, you enjoy your life, you be thankful for your family, you walk around and be present in the present, you would see that God has blessed us, and our lives are blessed, right? And He wants us to live in that peace and fulfillment. So that it was a good lesson. If you didn't get anything out of it, I definitely did, because I don't want to live in the what-ifs. So I hope that you got something from this. I think we have a little bit of time, and there's coffee, and I had Lori go get some goodies. So go out and enjoy some time together before preaching.